Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are being with us today here at the next Legacy Changemaker broadcast. We at the Legacy Changemaker broadcast strive to bring and to celebrate changemakers. We're trying to connect them, and of course, we are trying to inspire them to further work towards a more peaceful, prosperous, hopeful, and people and planet-centered world. And if you're watching live, please don't forget that you do have a direct access to us. You can drop your question or you can drop your comment. We will see it and we will pass it on to our speaker today. So before I keep on going and talking about Legacy Changemaker, let me tell you, who do we have today? We have a very, very special speaker, and her name is Denise Cooper, or as known by her nickname, Denise Deno Cooper. So Colonel Denise Deno Cooper has her last job on active duty as the Managing Director of Project Chapman, a multi-year project to support air education and training commanders' research on Air Force leader development for national defense. The project supports the Air Force's strategy priority of developing exceptional leaders and is in direct support of force development continuum of learning. She received her nickname Deno some 25 years ago, and she holds a PhD in organizational behavior. Among her vast experiences, here are just a couple: executive leader of diverse and complex organizations, strategic human capital partner to senior executives in the US Air Force, thought leader and influencer analyzing complex organizational issues from sexual assault to cadet behavior, and of course, culture change. Deno is to retire from the US Air Force on June 1st, 2021. You may not know that yet, but Deno has been the inspiration for Mesa Gong, our previous change maker. And if you have not yet watched the video and the chat with Mesa, please go to our YouTube channel or to our website, www.legacychangemaker.com. Here is what inspires Mesa about Deno, and I'm reading. Deno has had an incredible career in a men's world. She's incredibly generous spirit with anyone around her. And she's incredibly respected and knowledgeable. Thank you so much, Mesa Gong, for showing us who inspired you. So today we're here with Deno, and we are going to talk about the beauty of bad days. So Deno, hello, how are you?
I'm great. Good morning from Texas, San Antonio, Texas.
Thank you so much for being, it's an early hours for you in Texas, right?
I love it. It's not too early for a military gal. This is almost late.
That's right. Okay, so let's go straight into the context of, into the content of what we're going to talk about. So my first question to you is, what is the pulse of the time we're living in? And why should we all embrace the beauty in bad days?
You know, that over nearly 3 decades of serving in uniform, I and many others have seen massive changes. And I believe that the first point I would like to make is that there are practical and philosophical differences between what we would have called the industrial age and this movement to the knowledge economy, the information age, the digital age. And so what worked in the industrial era of production as the driving force of the economy may not work as well in the more fluid, turbulent, disruptive age of the knowledge economy. So, you know, it depends on how you define a bad day, right? I mean, a bad day can be a real crisis. It could be a death of a loved one. It could be an act of personal violence against yourself. It could be something catastrophic. And it can be like what Google defines as a bad day. And it's kind of a whimsical sort of an idea, but it's defined as when everything seems to be going wrong and you just want to throw your hands up in the air screaming, I give up, because clearly the world is out to get you. So I think that there's a big umbrella underneath bad idea, and I certainly want to honor that. In my own personal life, though, just, the things I mentioned are things that I have personally experienced. But in time, with work, I can see the beauty in that. And the beauty is the personal growth, the learning, the increase in growth in my humility and humanity. And so bad days do that for us. In the knowledge economy, though, what makes it different, and for those who are watching and who will watch later, think of images in your mind, industrial knowledge, and what that might conjure up for you in terms of how they look different. A bad day in the industrial age is non-compliance, lack of efficiency. A bad day in the knowledge economy was like, this version didn't work, let's iterate and let's try again. So I think for those reasons, I could make an argument that there is beauty in bad days, especially as it goes to the vision of legacy change maker, creating a more peaceful world and not hanging on to what might be referred to as resentments or getting stuck in self-pity, and that we embrace a new paradigm around the idea of bad days are really our friend today.
That's great. Thank you for mentioning it. You have been working most of your life around turnarounds and pivoting. You have helped individuals pivot. You have helped organizations pivot. Now, can you share some of your experience, organizational and, of course, individual experiences around how is pivoting done in a knowledge economy?
Sure. Well, disruption is the key characteristic of an information age. That information is ubiquitous. The internet and technology has enabled that. Even Zoom helped us stay highly connected during the pandemic. So the context of bad days in this sense for an organization can range anything from a scandal. And for example, in my career, helping the nuclear enterprise in the United States Air Force turn around from what was a bad day or maybe a bad couple of decades, where the nuclear enterprise experienced a massive cheating scandal of over 100 officers located in one base. Thankfully, our strategic leaders in the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force said, systematically, something has happened here, and we would like individuals who study and research in this area to follow behind what was a criminal look to say, what were the conditions that created this?
And before you go on, can you tell us a little bit more about what happened? Why were you asked to work on this, to research it, and then, of course, to implement it at the level of the organization?
Well, the nuclear enterprise is a high consequence environment, and it's much more compliance based. And what had happened is that this particular mission set, which was very, very much had stature in the 1960s, sort of became a very, still very important mission, but with the rise of the fighter aircraft and the rise of stealth technology, this sort of still kind of stayed in the backdrop, and it lost perhaps some of its stature. So there was a cheating scandal where 100 junior officers shared notes and shared classified information. These are things that just struck, a chord. We're like, how could this happen in this environment? So for that particular mission set, it really became an internationally recognized scandal. And because I have a background in organizational behavior, helping understand why things happened and putting practices into place to remedy the injuries and the harms of the past, I guess the path found me, and I became a person that senior leaders called on to understand how this bad day happened, and moreover, how to move forward.
Sorry, I was muted. What did you find in your research, and how did you help it? How did you help put it in place?
Yeah, there was an interesting theory by Dr. Diane Vaughan, who called this phenomenon the normalization of deviance. And over time, now deviance sounds like a big word. It really does kind of mean non-compliance. But over time, imperceptibly, these practices became normal and in this way normalized. And they were very much not in alignment with core values or with the policies and practices of that community. And it's akin to like a boiling frog, where a frog can get, I guess for people who eat frogs, what they've learned is that if you put a frog in water and you slowly turn up the heat, the frog doesn't have a perception of this is going to lead to my death. But if you put a frog in hot water, it will immediately jump out. So kind of a rough metaphor for kind of understanding the normalization of deviance. And in that way, we were able to present to the senior leaders a theory of change, a theory that could help them contextualize how this bad day happened.
And what did you learn from it?
Oh, well, the senior leaders recognized that the practices were in some part incentivized by the senior leaders' choices, their policy decisions, how they staffed that decision, because there's a fixed sum of money, right? It's a zero-sum game where if they get this piece of a pie, somebody else gets a smaller piece. So over the years, money, people, manpower, billets, all were reassigned to different places as force was getting smaller. And the mission set had lost some of its stature in importance as the fighter technology and the stealth technology increased. And so, if you leave an organization with one leader and a bunch of very, very inexperienced, maybe you would call that weak followers, but inexperienced followers, and there's not a strong context for that, you can really create the conditions for what we saw as toxic triangles, way more than toxic leaders.
I got it. The toxic triangle. Leaders, inexperienced followers, and weak context. Right?
Yes. And, in the military, we often will bring in officers or senior enlisted who have multiple years of experience, because they become the coach to the weaker followers. And they also have enough experience and self-confidence, self-efficacy to be able to tell the leader, hey. And so if you take out that very important part of the system, you create the conditions for a toxic triangle.
Thank you so much. You have shared with us a turnaround that you've done in the nuclear industry, and it was a successful, right? It was a 0 to hero turnaround and pivot.
Yes, it was a 0 to hero. And I take no credit for that at all, other than to say I was very shocked when the senior leader said, hey, thanks for all the great research and ideas and policy recommendations. I'd like to bring you onto the senior leadership team to help turn this organization around. So under a very charismatic, visionary wing commander, our organization did turn. But I was a little horrified to say, hey, this is hard work implementing this change. So they made me put my money where my mouth was. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to be a part of that. Now, personally, I've had challenges that were coming to fruition about that same time. So if you wanted me to talk quickly about a personal example.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, when you asked me, what is my why? What is the change that I want to bring? What do I, as my life, want to contribute to the greater good? I really felt that my whole life, I have seen this pattern of being in a situation of having to pivot or having to turn around, sometimes from crisis, sometimes from a catastrophic medical event, like the stroke that I had. And at the time when I was working in the nuclear enterprise, what came up for me was I had tried to stuff an event that had happened when I was a junior officer with only 4 years of experience in the Air Force. And while I was deployed, I had been sexually assaulted while I was asleep in my room. This is a story that many, many women now feel comfortable talking about. But when I was young, that was a taboo. And the message that I got was I had done something wrong. I contributed to the situation. And the fact that I had been drinking put me in this problematic, you brought this on yourself. And nobody actually said those words, but the atmosphere and the optic was clearly, I had done something wrong. And so while I was in that particular job in Montana, I had to take a look at a lot of things, some of the coping mechanisms that I had used, some of the strategies I had used with people that I felt were not seeing it my way. Really didn't work at when you put on the rank of colonel, when you have enough power and the power differential is so great that that kind of behavior is a bit obnoxious. And that's when I started to go to therapy and to look at the idea that I had PTSD. I did not want to acknowledge it because I was in a nuclear environment. Although I was in a combat support role, I felt that I did not want to be seen as damaged goods. But in time, that has become a real beautiful part of my identity. And I don't see the day as beautiful, but I do see the recovery as beautiful. And so I think it's particularly important to talk about issues of mental health because it is directly linked to our social capital, our human capital, and our intellectual capital in ways that maybe could get glossed over in the Industrial Revolution. And so in that way, I feel very committed to helping people pivot, turn, and grow through whether it's just this bad day where I think the world's out to get to me, or it's this bad day of I am completely a victim in what has happened to me. So I believe that as an academician, as a person who has been in the field of research, that I can bring that peer-reviewed science to this arena of pivoting and turning, because you need to in a knowledge economy where collaboration, innovation, iteration, adaptation are very much a part of the competitive forces in the knowledge economy. And so practically speaking, we should be happy, joyous, and free as people. Also, we need to take a look at the stuff. And in the knowledge economy, I think the phrase goes, it only catches up with you until it catches up with you, and it always catches up with you. And so I think there's a real call to action about doing our own work. And I think it's kind of in vogue today to have a therapist and to have a space that's sacred and that you work on those things.
Yes, and I hear this just reminded me of a very famous quote of Alvin Toffler, who said, "The future belongs to those who are able to learn, unlearn, and relearn fast," right?
Yes, absolutely.
No matter what happens to us.
Yes. And I think Mesa said in your last podcast that one of the most dangerous neighborhoods that she's been in is like what's between her ears and don't go alone. And so if we're going to have good thinking, clear thinking, critical thinking, we do need to make sure that this is healthy, just like we make sure our bodies are healthy.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for sharing with us a personal pivot and, of course, an organizational pivot. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about a pivot that did not go so well?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Part of the beauty of bad days is, hey, we're all human. The dance with perfection is just a fallacy. And a place that I have struggled recently, and I will continue to work, is with executive politics and at the senior levels where there is real money, real loss, real gain, is learning how to operate in that environment without, like in my case, without getting my PTSD triggered, going, you're out to get me, you're a threat. And we're learning to work through that with diplomacy and grace.
Would you advise a young woman, let's talk about women, because both of us are women, and maybe we have some women out there in the audience listening to us. What would you advise a young woman who has just been offered to become an executive and needs to work around the executive politics?
Yeah, I think that had I had done things differently, I would have told myself, get a trusted mentor who is not in the system actively and perhaps is retired from the system, who understands the cultural drivers in the system, and have that person a regular part of my work schedule with a weekly meeting, because it's the little things that festered that maybe I misinterpreted or read the room wrong, that I could bounce those ideas off with and look at kind of what they say, the ladder of inference, walk down at what examples did I see to draw that conclusion, and why did I use this particular strategy? Like, don't send that email. And so, that's the advice I would give, because you can't do it alone. And if our own minds can be a dangerous neighborhood, that means there is the possibility, even for the most critical thinker, to have blind spots, maybe like what Mesa talked about in terms of bias. And certainly, we're humans, and we do have feelings. I think we've learned that time and time again, that I guess it's think fast, think slow, that we do have different parts of our brain, and there's an elephant of our emotions, and the rider of our read is, that's to quote Height's work. But that's something that I think is absolutely critical at the executive level, because you build coalitions differently. You don't send emails, you have sit-down visits. But what I do love about Brene Brown's work is that in her organization, she doesn't tolerate the back channel or the meeting after the meeting. She is really committed to brave leaders doing the work together and rumbling together. And so perhaps I wish I had read that book before my position, but I do think you have to completely be in reflection and look for the different actions you can take.
Thank you so much. Now, here's my next question. Given that we live in a knowledge economy, and given that we need to learn fast in order to be competitive or collaborative in this knowledge economy, let's call it collaborative because it's a better way of being together, right? What would you advise our audience to do? What is your practical hands-on advice?
Well, yeah, I love how when we were working together, we talked a lot about calls to action. And so the first thing I would say is that you must have a very robust self-care plan. And there's a lot about that right now. Workout, it's good for you. It's even good for your brain. It can help restore, synapse connections, blah, 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 neuropsychology. But to me, it has to be the foundation of a professional. Let's say you're a young entrepreneur and you're just starting up in the system. Perhaps you're like me, you're a tired person going into phase 2. It's just very, very, very real. And in my own world, because I have journeyed through the recovery community, I have journeyed through the victim survivor path. For me, it's like wake up and get the brain straight. And that includes meditation. I'm very, very grateful to Janelle McCauley for opening my mind to mindfulness. I journal, I do yoga, and I do a lot of breath work. Because if you don't do those things daily, practice doing them daily, they're not available when the big day hits, and you really need that to be second nature. So that's the first thing I would say is very important, is the self-care.
You spoke a little bit about mantras. Can you tell us your 3 big mantras?
There are so many, but in the recovery world, they're posters on a sign. But for me, it's like progress, not perfection. One day at a time. This idea of let it go, and this too shall pass. And they become real. If you're bowling and you have the bumper aisles up, these are things that really help me stay out of the behavior that's not productive and stay in the place that is. And so I have these, and sometimes it's just a breath in, whole breath out. That one's pretty popularized, but for me, those things help connect me back so I can pivot away from a response that probably isn't going to create an optimal outcome.
Okay, so your first big call to action is take good care of yourself, mentally and physically. What is your second call to action?
Gosh, when we were visiting, we talked about the need for feedback and having a different relationship with it than the industrial age, because feedback in the industrial age is you have messed up, we didn't comply, we're not efficient. And so for me, I think that reframing feedback as the accelerant for your personal growth, your professional growth, and that it is your friend and you need to fight for it. The work of Lisa Scott with Radical Candor is tremendous. And if we could just show this quick graphic that has quadrants, and it's like giving feedback and then receiving feedback. And I think that what I have learned over the years is you become better at receiving feedback by practicing giving feedback. And in her framework, Kim argues that you can care personally on the y-axis, and on the horizontal axis is challenged directly. And to be in this area of radical candor is where the profound growth happens. And I love how she says, if you're low on caring personally and you're low on challenging directly, you're in manipulative insincerity, and too high but not too much ruinous empathy is not awesome. And then my personal favorite is high on being direct but low on caring, then you're just obnoxious aggression. And those outcomes are pretty powerful in my mind. So feedback is your accelerant to growth in the information age, the knowledge economy. It's all about iteration. So feedback loops keep systems alive, and they keep ecosystems alive, and they keep you growing. So have a great mindset about it.
Thank you. That's really great. So let me just repeat. Feedback is an accelerant to growth. Find a person who can give you radical candor feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your second call to action. And do you have a third one? Oh, no, wait a second. Tell us about how do we find somebody to give us good feedback, somebody we trust?
Absolutely. And this is something that I got from Charlie Kim. He owns a company called Next Jump, featured in a book about deliberate development. And in their organization, they call it a trust partner. You might call it a mentor. You might call it a coach. You might call it a good friend. But I love the language of trust partner, because this is the person that's going to help you process the cycle of feedback, the sting that might affect your ego, and how quickly you can go through that cycle and how little time it takes you to get through the cycle is going to give you the competitive advantage. So a bad day is beautiful because it gives you valuable feedback about yourself, your human capital, your social capital. And as Charlie would say, you invest in loss. And in this way, you can process that so you can fight for the actionable feedback. Okay, so what could I do differently? You're obnoxious. Okay. Can you give me an example and what would I do differently? So don't worry about the labels. Look for the action. And the trust partner, as Charlie and Megan would call it, is beautiful language for doing that. So very critical.
Yes, when you ask for feedback and when you receive feedback, always look for what is actionable in the feedback you've gotten. And if there's nothing, ask for more. Something Absolutely. That is actionable, right?
Absolutely. And I think if we're going to be a trusted partner, we have a responsibility to develop skills and competencies on how to do that. One thing that I love that Mesa actually introduced to me was the immunity to change worksheet. And, this statistic that people who need to take heart medicine to save their life aren't taking their medicine and end up dying earlier. And I was like, what theory could explain that? So this wonderful resource is a framework we develop sort of like this vaccine to changing the very behavior, whether it's taking medicine or fitness. And in this case, this is just a quick example for those who might like to explore this a little bit more, is what I'm not doing, what is the hidden commitment? And like what they found through the studies is that we don't take heart medicine because we don't want to admit we're getting old and we're getting closer to death. And that is going to compete with the rationale for the change. So this is a wonderful framework. In recovery circles, they call it the fourth step, resentful towards somebody. What is it affecting? What is my part? And it allows the person to work through a resentment to get to change. So there are quite a few tools out there, and I personally love those two in particular because they're professional and a personal application.
Thank you so much. And last question, how to find a trust partner? What is trust?
Well, I love the trust quotient. It's a framework that has a copyright that goes along with it. But what I love about it is it's a quotient where the top needs to be bigger than the bottom. And so your credibility, you can trust what I say, your reliability, I'm on time, I do what I say, plus your intimacy, your personal warmth, your commitment to another's welfare, all over self-orientation. So if I'm creating this, what's in it for me? I'll do this, but what's going to come my way? That's going to change your quotient. And when you wonder why you don't really trust somebody, it could be one of those factors. This is very, very simple because trust is a very complex construct. But I find it very useful in terms of trying to understand kind of the very basic big rock elements of trust.
Thank you so much. So, dear listeners and dear viewers, if up to now you have not really known how to find somebody who is trustworthy, we hope that the trust equation can help you do that. So just to summarize quickly, take care of your personal and mental health, right? Find a trust partner who can give you feedback. And when a person gives you feedback, always look for the action. What can you do to be in a better place the next moment? And the last one, what is your last call to action, Denise?
Find a tribe, run with a tribe, work with a group, because we heal together. We might be getting hurt individually, but we heal together. And whether that's a recovery circle, a speakers group like Toastmasters, or just a cycling group, connection creates the healing together. And I think that's completely in line with your mission with Legacy Changemaker. But we get better together.
So that's a beautiful sentence to end on. We might be hurt individually, but we heal together. So thank you, Deno. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And of course, for sharing so much of yourself. And of course, I want to wish you all the best in your new life, which starts on Tuesday. And for those of us who have been with us, thank you so much. And we'll see you next Friday. Then we will have somebody who has inspired Deno, but we are not telling you yet. So thank you very much. Have a lovely Friday afternoon. If you're in Europe, just like me, if you're in Texas, just like Deno, have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.